Another Bible is a game so mediocre, even its name seems to be unimpressed with the fact that it exists. Great, another one. I know I don't usually start my discussion of a game by saying I'd rather get naked and hula hoop with a piece of barbed wire, but bear with me. This shit is bad. And not funny bad, like you just fucked up a puzzle and the game sent your ass all the way back to the beginning. I mean boring bad. Mind-numbingly dull. About as fun as digging your own grave with a toothpick. And that's coming from the guy who said this was kinda good. I suppose I'm getting ahead of myself here. Released in 1995, Another Bible is a Japan-exclusive strategy RPG for the Game Boy. It later received an upgraded port to cell phones in 2008, but unless you know someone that's been holding onto a Japanese flip phone for the past decade or so, I doubt you'll find a way to play it, so we're going to be playing the original with an English patch slapped onto it. The story and setting of Another Bible are pretty much entirely independent from all of the other games, so it could be considered a spin-off of a spin-off. For all of those people rioting in the streets for a watered-down Fire Emblem loosely based on the most generic Megami Tensei sub-series, Atlas delivered, and nearly 30 years later it's up to us to deal with the consequences. I know I just took a fat shit all over this game, but even the hottest circle of hell is appealing to some people, and it wouldn't be right to just skip it over. How about we give it a look? The plot involves the world of Granis, a place where humans and beasts, once sworn enemies, learn to settle their differences and live together, at least until a mysterious group who worships the beast appears and performs a ritual, urging the creatures to fight back against humanity and find true freedom. With the beasts ready for a brawl, the world needs a hero to step in and set shit straight. And that's where we come in. Start a new game, and it's time to name our protagonist, who looks like the most generic anime character that was ever given the chance to occupy 40 pixels. We also have to give a name to his partner in crime. These two are about to meet in one of the most romantic ways you could imagine. Press start, and it's time for our first level. The game's narration explains that after losing our parents at a young age, our character left on an endless journey across the world. Coming up to the nearby town of Nabia, we see a familiar face being accosted by a group of robbers, and it's up to us to stab them all in the gut and save the day. Your classic love story. The meat of the game takes place in these different scenarios, where you command your party across the board to defeat enemies, rescue or interact with NPCs, and pick up treasure. Between these stages, you visit towns for a chance to resupply and learn a piece of the game's story. Selecting your character, you'll notice you have meters for HP and PP. I'm going to be saying PP at least a few more times, so get your clever comments ready while you have the chance. HP is self-explanatory, and your PP is consumed when using special moves. Each character in your party has a limited space they can move per turn, with your restriction portrayed by, well, erasing the parts of the map that you can't reach. Once you've made it to where you want to go, you have a range of options at your disposal. Attacking an enemy, casting magic, using a special technique, or using an item will end your turn afterwards. But other actions like talking to the enemy, checking your stats, or opening a chest can be performed multiple times. If you see treasure, for example, you're free to run over, open that shit up, and then run back and attack an enemy without any penalty. I would say that you should do your best to position your party in key tactical positions to access as much of the map as possible and protect your weaker members. But here's the thing about Another Bible. It is so easy that even the most casual player could likely solo the entire game having never played a video game before in their life. I'm not exaggerating. I only managed to die once or twice after being randomly hit with a critical strike on my protagonist. The game has no equipment system whatsoever, and it hands out level ups and money like free candy. Unless you're literally avoiding battling enemies on purpose, you will quickly have maca and health potions coming out of your ass, and you'll be begging for something else to buy. In fact, aside from the main character and his partner, even death can't stop your party. Items to revive fallen party members are very easy to come by, and it's likely you only use a handful at most in any given playthrough. The units who do the fighting get the level ups, and you'll realize that dealing with a huge, well-rounded party is 100% pointless when 3 or 4 beefed up physical attackers works far better and is much faster, making you practically invincible at the later stages. Speaking of building a party, let's talk about the talk command. Well, that shit doesn't really do much anything. It has very, very limited utility, with one such use being the rescue of our partner on this level. Aside from that, it typically amounts to a pointless one-liner from a bad guy, or just a message that says they refuse to speak with you. See, recruiting enemies is something not done through the talk command, but rather specifically with the partner's convince technique. Use this next to an eligible enemy, and she'll ask it to be friends, and that's it. They join you. I would have to guess it's dependent on your character's level in some way, but every time I tried it, the shit just instantly worked without a single hiccup. There's no trick questions or quizzes here, they're just glad to join if you ask. It might sound fun to be able to quickly build up an army of whatever beasts you end up liking the most, but remember, the game doesn't incentivize this at all, and often it just slows you down. You can actually evolve certain beasts if you keep them for long enough, which to the game's credit is neat, but when it's as easy and bland as it is, the extra effort just feels wasted. The Fire Emblem games make you decide on what weapon would be the best to use against a given enemy. Final Fantasy Tactics has an interesting class system. This game makes you feel OP from the very beginning and never once requires you to think about anything. This sort of overly simple mash the A button to win type of thing might be fun in a hack and slash or some other genre of action game, but it just doesn't work very well with the strategy format. Based on the cutesy graphics and lighthearted action, you might imagine this is a game designed for children. If that's true and your kid is some kind of armchair general that just can't get enough strategy in their life, I don't know, throw them a copy of the fucking Art of War or something, I'm sure they'd appreciate it a lot more. Now don't worry, we're still gonna play it. Another Bible has 21 main maps to get through, not counting the little towns in between each one. At the risk of boring you to tears, I'll try to give you as complete of a picture as possible without it being too painful. So back at the start, make short work of the bandits closest to you, then talk to the girl. For the sake of this video, I'm just gonna call her Lilia. Our hero offers to bring Lilia to the town up ahead, and from there, it's up to us to keep her alive and mop up the remaining enemies. There's a little treasure chest with some maca if you want to get started hoarding money, and apparently, if you use the check command somewhere around the top of this bridge right here, you get warped to a little secret area with a handful of healing items and some extra cash. But I only figured that out after beating the game when looking at a guide. Not like you're gonna need that shit anyway, unless you want to be a walking pharmacy a few levels sooner than normal. Finish up fighting, use Lilia's healing power if your health gets low, and then touch the town icon at the top with your protagonist to complete the stage. The first person we meet in the town of Nabia is a guy named Wild, who is Lilia's manservant. Nice. He thanks us for shanking all those dudes outside, and Lilia starts gushing about how our ability to beat up starving and deprived bandits must indicate that we're the hero this world needs. So, the three decide to head out together in search of a way to set shit right. Aside from that, not much else goes on here. Some villagers mention a mysterious mural set up in the nearby Shucket Cave that depicts a record of the Beast War, not so subtly hinting at our next destination. Others spout general advice about game mechanics, such as this woman who explains that Lilia can communicate with monsters because she's so friendly. She also mentions the untimely death of Lilia's brother, but, we'll forget about that part. The best feature of these little towns may damn well be the inclusion of everyone's favorite bastard. That's right, it's Rag. God, as if this game couldn't get any worse. Fortunately, there's no crystal collecting for this little guy this time, and he functions as a general shopkeeper. Stock up in restoratives if you need to, and then it's time to check out Map 2, Shucket Cave. We start off outside the cave, and a handful of unicorns block our path. I know these are common enemies throughout the franchise, but I can't help but just imagine this squadron of absolute idiots traipsing through the woods picking fights with random vagrants and endangered animals. Anyway, it's easy shit. You can make use of Wild if you want, who's geared towards strong physical attacks. Keep Lilia just out of reach to ensure she doesn't take any damage, and then advance into the cave at the top of the map. One pretty neat thing about these maps with multiple sections is that you can leave some of your units behind to pick up treasure or finish off enemies you missed. Advancing to the next map with one character doesn't force all of the others to follow you. Inside the cave, you have a group of weredogs and ogres whose battle sprites have heads that are nearly double the size of your entire body. Freaky shit. They're just as simple as the unicorns are to defeat, though funnily enough, one did get a random crit on Wild that killed his ass. I was kinda shocked for a second because it just happened out of nowhere. The music turned all sad and Wild gave this little death speech about how it was the end of the road for him, and I was early on enough in the game that I thought it had permadeath. They sure played up the drama to make it seem that way. Well, there's no such thing. You can just revive the dude with a high on rate item. So much for that, I guess. Open the chest in the far end of the room, grab the slate inside, and head for the stairs. That's level 2. You end up in the town of Janoon, where you can recruit this girl named Hera, who functions as an attack-focused caster. She translates the slate we found in Shucket Cave, saying that the Beast War is going to happen again, and that she'd better join us to try and stop it. She also mentions a group of people called Fida who can control beasts directly. Interesting. The village elder warns of a cave across the sea where a group of thieves live, led by a man named Strauss. Guess where we're going next. On the way out of town, you run into this fucking ninja named T just standing there. He says we'll never be able to fix the world at our power level and runs off. What a cool guy. Map 3, the Den of Thieves, is naturally filled with human enemies, but it's where we're gonna get a party member that becomes a mainstay until the very end of the game. Cut through the weak thieves on the first floor, making use of Hera's long distance magic, and then advance to the stairs. Below, you got a few items you can pick up, including one that permanently boosts your speed stat. Blast through the room, then gang up your team around Strauss, attacking him in succession to quickly bring him down. After beating the literal shit out of him, he immediately inserts himself into our party, somewhat to the dismay of the main character. At least there's a bit of self-awareness at how ridiculous it is that these people just throw themselves at you, begging to wander the planet together having just met you seconds ago. Strauss mentions a nearby resistance village that can help us figure out things and get a leg up in the upcoming Beast War, so fuck it, let's go there. Stage 4, Sage Valley, starts off with no break between the last one. Not a problem. The village up ahead is under attack, and we've got to clear the way to gain access. If you're like me, this is probably gonna be where you start to get sick of the game. It's the same old thing every stage, and this one's crawling with weak enemies too, many of which remain stationary until you get close to them. However, the game still has to simulate their turns, so you just watch the camera focus in on each enemy for a second as they do absolutely nothing. It's painstaking. Grit your teeth, smack some ass, and watch out for the wyverns who can fly over the map's mountains. There's a little section with a hoard of treasure if you want to boost your funds. Aside from that, well, there's not much to say. At the Resistance Village, we learn that there are items spread throughout the world called Magnus Stones, representing flame, water, earth, and wind, each with impressive power. We're probably going to need those at some point. Inside this building over here, you can meet a girl whose name is fucking Oopie. What the fuck? She's the pastor here and explains that we can meet a group of Fida at the peak of a nearby volcano. These guys should help us beat some beast ass and annihilate the cult once and for all. She also suggests that we meet Master Maya if we're in a pinch. Good to know. Outside, you can recruit her daughter, whose name is Freon. The hell is wrong with people's names in this world? Like, yeah, you see that girl outside? That's my daughter Kerosene. It's French. Anyway, she's a spear user that I rarely ever made use of because Strauss and my protagonist would usually get to the enemies faster and hit them harder. You can also run into T again. This time, our protagonist gets pissed and loudly asks, "Who the hell are you?" Which is kind of funny to see in a cutesy Game Boy game. He basically just tells us what we already know. Get all 4 of the Magnus Stones, and we'll be able to get a Holy Sword. Thanks. Map 5, the Desert's End, is our first stop on the way to the volcano. It's literally just a flat map with a few patches of water. Have at it. You'll need to beat a boss here, this guy named Alta. Bring him down with your usual brain-dead tactics, and then it's revealed he was under some sort of mind control which caused him to go berserk. Alta is actually one of my favorite units because he can get pretty physically powerful in addition to being able to throw out some buffs and magical attacks. You probably won't need these unless you really get cornered or you're facing the final boss, but he's a versatile guy and I enjoyed leveling him up. Now apparently in the middle of this weird little patch of dark squares, you can check the ground and find some kind of secret path. I didn't do this. The last thing on my mind playing this game was clicking the check button in the center of geometrical patterns. It's kinda cool, but you can also just buy the secret part you find here in late game shops. These parts can be used to recruit a robotic party member, so keep it in mind if that's something you're interested in. Head into town and we're in Deza. Very little to do here except resupply and get the usual tidbits. An old lady tells us about a treasure hunter named Ray in a nearby pyramid, and as you probably guessed, that's where we're headed next. Let's take care of map 6. The biggest threat of this place is probably the Loki enemies, but it's never anything you can't handle. Close in on them as fast as you can to avoid giving them a chance to use their spells, and you should be fine. This is another one of those multi-floor dungeons. On the second floor, we meet Ray, who ended up having an extremely short screen time during my playthrough. As soon as I met and recruited her, a Loki murdered her. Her dramatic speech was honestly hilarious because I don't think I knew her for longer than a second or two. I don't even think I bothered reviving her until the very end of the game because it was just that funny. The top floor has Pazuzu, who ain't shit. Take him down, crack open the chest behind him, and we've got the Earth Magnus. Nice. In Casbah, the next town, one NPC questions what would happen if Heaven's Bible was used to worship a god other than Maya. I guess that'd make it another Bible. Haha, please kill me. T comes back yet again and explains that all will be revealed in the feed a town past the volcano. You really got me on the edge of my seat here, I'm serious. Alrighty, map 7. We're climbing up the volcano. This one blows ass long and hard. It's just a big old windy path to the end, and it takes like 1,000 years to get to the end of it. The protagonist, Strauss, Alta, and Wild were my point men, taking the lead and easily blowing a path through everything. At this point, I still decided it was worth bringing some of the laggards with me, so it took even longer because I wanted to move everyone along to the end. Don't do that. Just use a small group and get your main man up at the front so you can reach the end as soon as possible. You can recruit this half-demon guy here called Rinfa, who's kinda cool for being able to easily cross lakes and mountains. There's also a hidden treasure room if you fuck around with examining some miscolored floor tiles. Again, I don't care about this shit. I just keep mentioning them because I now know they exist and it feels weird to leave it out. From now on, I'm just gonna leave these out of the explanation. They exist, some of them have short little bits of dialogue with monsters, but it always leads to pointless treasure. You are hardly missing anything by not finding them. When you finally reach the end of the shit dump, the floor collapses and you get taken straight to map 8, which is some kind of abandoned mine. The place has a whole lot of items and money, so grab those up while they're all nicely laid out for you. Steamroll through the monsters lurking down here, and eventually, you'll come across some robotic enemies. They surprisingly put up more resistance than usual. You can talk to the one on the far right who refers to himself as Proto-Clay, who was created in a distant town called Iranal. He notices that we're protecting a, quote, shrine maiden, which, if you couldn't guess, is definitely Lilia. He says that we can find additional help by visiting his world, then vanishes. Alrighty. The Flame Magnus is also in a chest nearby, so that's another cool little stone for our collection. With that, we got another level in the bag. Shit, that was only map 8? There's like 13 more. Well, don't worry, it speeds up from here. At the Fida village, we hear of a place called Karma Loka at the top of a tower at the end of the earth. There, Maya, the god of all, makes his home. Kind of funny that this guy just doxes God like that. I'm sure he doesn't appreciate random ass dudes in the mountains knowing exactly where he lives. Another guy, Nesbit, informs us that Lilia is indeed a shrine maiden integral to saving the world. Turns out, she was specifically sent to a town in the middle of nowhere as a young child so that the beasts wouldn't find her. To accompany us on the rest of our journey, this old geezer named Ether hops on board too. Finally, Nesbit urges us to defeat someone called Vivati, giving us our next goal to look forward to. Guess it really was worth it to climb all the way up here. Well, let's move on. Map 9, a peaceful little walk at the lake. Movement here is pretty slow unless you got certain items like wings due to how heavily forested it is. Aside from that, I don't have much to say about it. It's one of the more generic stages of the entire game, and that's saying something. On the second screen of this level, you can recruit a girl named Sepia, and you also find the Water Magnus. It's kind of crazy how anticlimactic finding these damn things tends to be. I don't expect a cutscene or a parade or anything, but these are supposed to be some seriously powerful artifacts. At least make the treasure chests look different? I don't know. Move ahead, let Rags use up your PP back in town, and it's on to the next map. After getting past the lake area, we roll up on the Beast Castle, where the party starts to feel uneasy about facing this Vivati guy. I'm sure it'll be fine. Here you can recruit a party member named Ozone if you have Freon active in your party. At this point, I had the party trimmed down to just a few people, so I actually missed out on this extra member. But geez, I think we have enough already. The second floor of this place is actually its own separate stage, so we're kinda knocking out 2 for 1 here. On the top level, you get a strong number of beefy enemies waiting for you, including a boss, Lilith, at the end of the room. I noticed a funny translation oddity on this floor. You'll find these enemies that the game calls Toll, but clearly it's supposed to be Thor. Well, saying Thor in Japanese would be Toru, but that also kinda sounds like Toll, so I guess someone got the wrong idea and just put that down. Not a huge deal, but I think it's kinda interesting. As for Lilith, she's a joke. Just hit her a few times and, yeah, that's it. Well, believe it or not, it's time for Vivati already. This is stage 12. His throne room yet again comprises its very own stage. Told you it started to get a little faster. It's basically just a huge line down to the throne, with demons at all sides ready to pounce the entire way. My strategy was just to send 1 or 2 guys right down the middle, demons on the sides be damned, and have the others mop up those while I rush the boss. A somewhat neat aspect of this level is that the monsters will actually make formations specifically to block you from doing this. If only more of the other levels were like this, I mean, it's not much, but this seemingly unique little behavior made the level feel much more alive than just running around smacking shit in the woods. Vivati himself won't go down easily with normal attacks, and he can siphon your health with an absorption move, meaning unless you hit him really hard, you'll kinda be stuck trading blows and not making any progress. Fortunately, there's a really easy way to take care of this. Use your protagonist's Shine Blade technique. 1 hit is all it takes. Nice. Vivati's defeat is kinda hilarious because the guy says you're pretty good like fucking Revolver Ocelot, then does an evil laugh as he vanishes. Notice that he doesn't die. We're not quite through with him yet, but for now, we can move on. After that whole shenanigan comes to an end, we find ourselves in the Fringe Village. A woman mentions people living on a nearby glacier, and a guy standing a few feet away talks about a powerful sage named Inazo who used to live here. Finally, an old lady brings up that Ninja T and how he was headed for Karmaloka Gate. Guess we'll be seeing him again soon. Map 13, the Great Glacier, is just about as boring as Volcano. It's just a shitload of enemies on a boring map. And the actual combat screen is pure blinding white, as if the game is trying to murder you for playing it this long. The town you reach afterwards is called Irok, and it's filled with igloos. A lady here reminds us of the holy sword up for grabs if we find all the Magnus stones. Thanks, I remember that from 2 hours ago. Moving on, level 14 is where we start our journey to the tower where God is rumored to hang out. Kick some ass, grab some treasure, you know the deal. At this point, you're probably playing the game on autopilot. Some of my party members had fully maxed stats and had effectively become unstoppable death-slinging machines. Short of a boss, it's highly doubtful anything can stop you when you're this far in, as even a random crit is hard-pressed to instantly kill you like it did earlier. Reach the town of Nelg, buy what you need, and then we're on to Mahamaya Tower. This dungeon stretches 4 floors up, making it the biggest so far in terms of verticality. You can run into some pretty crazy enemies here like Azura and even Shiva. He is the same battle sprite as Thor though. In fact, quite a lot of enemy sprites are recycled, again lessening the impact of any exciting new encounters. There's nothing really special about the top floor, just get there, step out, and you're in heaven. It's a bit smaller than I imagined. A nearby angel lurking around explains that a gate up ahead leads to the world of machines, just like that robot from the mines told us. Apparently, there's a big bad deactivated robot in there. We learn from another angel that Vivati hated humans for creating machines, creating the beast cult as some kind of response to that effort. Weird. We'll take a few more steps and you can just walk into God's house. Seriously, he just lives right here. He tells us that the machine world is all but extinct of humans, and that Vivati wants to finish off the rest of them as punishment. Apparently, his ultimate plan is to change this world's Bible into, wait for it, another Bible to get what he wants. And yeah, I'm not joking, that's exactly what he says. So, let me lay this out, because I don't think the game does a good job of explaining it. Vivati is a being with similar power to Lilia, except he's from the future, where the invention of machinery caused the downfall of humanity. Rather than use his power for good, Vivati came to the past, started the beast cult, and tried to kill us to kill himself in the future. Having failed that end, he intends to rewrite the book that maintains the fabric of reality in a final effort to outright kill everything. You know, I wasn't quite expecting a time travel suicide plot to be what this game gave me, but I gotta say, it's sorta cool once you finally get drip-fed all the necessary information. With that, it's up to us to jump into the future and finish him off. God tells us to go grab the Wind Magnus, then return for the promised Holy Sword. Sounds good. On the way out, you can stop by Rags if you need to. It's kind of fucked up that not only has Rag managed to spread his business from the literal depths of hell to being neighbors with God, there's apparently a need for the shit he sells in heaven, and they couldn't find anyone else. Level 16, the Wind Tower, is another throwaway stage. It's incredibly short too. Grab the Wind Magnus, show it to God, grab the sword, and we're on to 17, the gate to the machine world. This is the beginning of the end, finally. Blocking our path to the gate is T, so you can either head straight up to him or mess around with the other enemies and pick up a few extra treasures. You'll face some bots up here that are pretty strong, but their attacks are mostly weak, so just keep hammering away until they die. T himself can be brought down easily enough with a few standard attacks, or the Shine Blade technique. As he goes down, he says our team is impressive, expressing his desire to fight against the strong. The entire game, he was watching our progress, blah blah blah. He wants us to make sure we can finish the fight. He gives us some extra power from the Saints, then he dies. The protagonist is touched by this and vows to kill Vivati once and for all. Jump through the gate, and we end up in a weird-ass looking place near Iranal. We start out in this gray, desolate machine world totally alone. Yeah, one of these stages actually has a neat gimmick, wow. So we have to go around the map and talk to each of our team members to reform the squad. Then it's just your average slugfest. Except, wait, Lilia isn't here. Yeah, we gotta go save her ass. Gang up on the toughest robots to bring them down fast, then head towards the gate at the top of the map to escape. Believe it or not, there's a town here called Mayakaku. The NPCs here are on some strange shit. One guy, simply called Weirdo, seems to laugh hysterically about the fact that his world is destroyed, screaming that another Bible is in position. Kinda sounds like the game's about to fuck you in the ass or something. There's even a different shopkeeper here, and he can power up your robotic party member if you got one. Not much else to say, but this desolate future was by far the most fun part of the game for me to explore. Our next map is the Machine Tower, stage 19. It's time to rescue Lilia and save the world. Carefully make your way through the place, being wary of robots who can shoot at you from a distance. Bust through the overabundance of machines crawling through the place, and level 20 starts soon after. At the far end of a huge room filled with more robots is Vivati, with Lilia sitting right next to him. Run up and use your best moves on him, being sure to eliminate the other strong enemies that linger near where he sits. They could put out some decent damage as well, and while it's unlikely, you can get overwhelmed. Once Vivati crumbles, he screams in our face asking if we're satisfied. The protagonist says that we can never forgive Vivati for what he's done, urging him to repent for his violent actions. As he finally dies, he says that our future is sealed. Lilia returns to normal, and the only thing left is to deal with another Bible. Yeah. Map 21, Final Darkness, begins right away and is all that's left of the game. So how do you fix a cursed book that threatens to destroy the laws of the universe? Well, you beat the shit out of it. Your best bet for destroying this thing is the time-tested Shine Blade technique. Everything else does pretty pitiful damage. Despite my stats being maxed out, I'd often miss attacks, meaning I'd have to waste time healing the heavy damage the book spits out. If you're using Alta, he's got a spell that blocks magic that seemed to help. I wasn't sure if it was actually working or I just got lucky, but it was worth a shot since nobody but the protagonist was really doing any damage. After a few successful hits, a big glowing parasite appears in the center of it, and we've got to bring it down again. The same strategy applies. Use Shine Blade, heal, maybe attack with your other guys if you got room up on the altar, and repeat. I'd advise keeping Lilia pretty far back if you haven't leveled her up much. If she takes a hit here, it may severely damage her, and you just don't want to risk it. After a good handful of strikes, it's over. Another Bible starts to change back into the good old normal Bible, and that's it. The epilogue explains that the world returned to harmony, and Lilia returned to her village to watch over the earth. Everyone else continued their adventures, and they all vow to meet again someday. If you manage to recruit every character in the game and keep all of them alive, which I sure didn't, you'll also get an extra little epilogue for each character that goes into slightly more detail on their future, complete with some additional art. I gotta admit, this is cute, but the only way I'm gonna play this game again is if I'm held captive and tortured into doing it. Well, that certainly was a video game. I guess it's not the worst game I've ever played, but I really had trouble finding much to enjoy about this one, aside from its simple, charming art and a handful of little moments. The core battle system is just boring, the maps really require no strategy, and the world is about as generic as it could possibly be, at least until the whole little time travel section kicks in. The soundtrack is fine, though it quickly gets grating and repetitive. It's easily the worst Megaten game I've played, that's for sure. Maybe that long-lost cell phone version improves it a bit? There are some screenshots floating around out there, like on this release document from BBMF, the company behind a good bit of those games. Shout out to Vesk for showing me this. The extra color looks nice, but watching my own death in full color wouldn't make it more enjoyable either. I can only really see the appeal for this game if you really love the franchise and want to experience its furthest depths, or you're in the mood for a very, very easy game to kill a few hours with, and you've got nothing to lose, like, at all. If you like this game, or you elect to play it yourself, I'd love to hear your input, because I just couldn't get into it. My intention with taking you through the entirety of this game wasn't to scare you away from it, but it wouldn't exactly have been right for me to fluff up my opinion on it either. Alright, with that out of the way, it's time to move on to something else unique for the series. Megami Tensei Gaiden Last Bible Special is the series' only first-person dungeon crawler, released in 1995 for the Sega Game Gear in Japan. Just like the first Last Bible game, this one also got the micro treatment, though playing this on a Game Gear Micro sounds worse than covering up the windshield of your car and then going for a drive. In both situations, it's impossible to see anything, and it'll probably kill you. Just like another Bible, this game has practically nothing to do with the others, and the box art really wants you to know that. This shit honestly looks metal as hell. They did away with the lighter, more child-friendly look of the other games, and went straight to the raw, bleeding abyss with this one, painting you a vile army of cruel demons, complete with exposed bird titties. Suitable for all ages, my ass. Buying this for your kid is like throwing them a pencil when they ask for a new book to read. This shit works your ass off. Even the people who made the English patch for this game seem to agree with me, because when you install it, you have the option of decreasing the encounter rate to a more comfortable level, as well as increasing your movement speed to make the game less tedious. I haven't seen anything like that on any other Megaten game I've played. Now don't worry, I haven't started caring about my mental health yet, So we're gonna play the game without any of those balancing fixes, because I really like you guys. So, what exactly is so special about Last Bible Special? Believe me, you have no idea. Start the game up, and you're greeted with a colorful, peppy intro that almost seems like it would fit in on a Saturday morning cartoon. If you showed me this intro and said I was about to play an arcade beat-em-up, I'd totally believe you. It's honestly pretty misleading because for the next 20 or 30 hours, you're going to be looking at some of the most dull, depressing dungeons you could ever imagine. Enjoy this brief burst of sensation while it lasts. When we load into the actual game, we're standing before a bishop who explains that it is our duty to make our way through 4 dungeons and reclaim Jerusalem from the Dark Lord Grias. Holy shit, slow down for a second. Jerusalem exists in the Last Bible universe? And wait, Grias? Yeah, if you're familiar with that name from the core Last Bible trilogy, I'm sure it stood out. Like I said, it's not connected to those games, but the big twist is extremely obvious if you have that prior knowledge. To help us on our crusade, the bishop very casually gives us the ability to control demons. He doesn't give you a computer or a stone tablet or anything like that, he just, tells you how to do it. With this newfound ability, he urges us to head to the town center and seek out companions for our quest. And that's it. You find your ass dumped out on the streets in the city of Constance with a series of destinations looming in front of you, with no further guidance. If you played a wizardry game before, this might look familiar. In games like this, it's you, your party, and the dungeon. Aside from a handful of brief moments, there is no more story to the game. But don't worry, this is a crusade that's certain to be paved with blood, sweat, and tears, and we'll have a lot to talk about by the time it's over. So, what do we do now? Well, let's just work our way down the list, and I'll show you what's up. For starters, you can return to the Constance Temple, where you can replay the bishop's speech in case you forgot the 3 sentences he said. More importantly, the temple functions as a place for you to manage your party. Right now it's still empty, but this is where you can upgrade character classes, change people's names, and view detailed stat pages. Press Edit Registry to get started. Our character starts off with the name Mattel, so I quickly changed it over to Marsh as an eternal reminder that this suffering was my own. Your stats page will show you each character's level, their current class, HP, MP, equipment, spells, and naturally, your upgradable skills. In this game, you're working with vitality, intelligence, strength, speed, and luck. By far, the most important skill in this game is speed. The encounters in this game are relentless, and there are more than a few bosses that can instantly kill or paralyze you. In this game, acting first is key to prolonged survival during lengthy dungeon crawls. Be sure to frequently upgrade this stat, it'll serve you very well in getting through this game alive. Aside from that, for our protagonists, you can basically build whatever character you want, and when building other characters, it's best to just upgrade stats according to your common sense. Melee fighters get strength and vitality upgrades, and casters get intelligence. Once you're feeling comfortable with the information accessible in these menus, we can move on to the last function of the temple. Press Temple Guards to reach a menu where you can store party members to be retrieved later. In Last Bible Special, you and 5 others make up a single party. If you want to recruit more human characters to your team, you can do so, but you'll have to leave some of them here, returning to town to switch them out when you see fit. I'll be honest, I didn't use this once during the entire game. It's cool that you can generate so many playable characters, but my recommendation is just create one solid squad that you use for the entirety of your playthrough. Unless you've got hours of time to kill, it's not going to be fun shuffling around 7 or 8 guys in your active party to keep them properly leveled. With that, we basically covered the temple. Unless you're in town and really want to look at your stats and generate dozens of characters, this place isn't super useful beyond the occasional class upgrade, especially considering you can just look at your skills and equipment out in the field anyway. With all this talk about classes and party building, how do we actually get started with that? Good question. That's where the Plaza, our next option down on the list, comes into play. The Town Plaza is your source of random rumors solicited from strangers and fresh meat for your crusade. Press Enlist and you got the option to recruit or remove people from your party. Let's give it a shot. Our character heads into the middle of the crowd and gives a bold speech, urging the people to look into their hearts and join our quest to free Jerusalem in the name of justice. What happens next is totally up to RNG. You'll either get one willing volunteer from the crowd, or nobody will join you. And you may not even like who shows up. Don't be afraid to decline potential recruits until you've found the perfect addition to your team. This process can be repeated as much as you'd like, and your setup has a huge impact on how difficult your game will be starting out. There are dozens of classes in this game to choose from. Beggars, actors, merchants, warriors, monks, doctors, exorcists, philosophers, knights, you name it. The amount of options for team builds is truly staggering, and as much as I've been saying that this game is brutal and tedious, this is one really cool aspect of it that I had a lot of fun with. Now, it's important to note that these classes are not all created equally. As you might imagine, a beggar's base stats suck absolute ass compared to a warrior, and an actor has no chance in hell against a mage. In addition to that, each class has its own equipment preferences. Many types of magic classes can't use heavy armor, and some, like peasants, start off using literal farming tools as weapons. That's not to say that any class is completely without merit, however. If you're crazy enough to keep a beggar until they reach level 77, for example, they can upgrade their class into a saint, which is one of the best in the entire game. Granted, level 77 is absurdly high, and I don't see why you'd want to keep a beggar in your party for that long, but the point is that each class has its own little gimmicks and powers that allow you to play the game how you want to, and even the worst classes tend to have their own secrets. How should you build your party? Well, most people seem to agree that one of the best party setups is 2 knights and 2 clerics. This covers your damage and healing, and leaves one spot open for you to recruit a demon companion. The problem is, each time you give your recruitment speech, the maximum amount of volunteers you can get at a time seems to be just 1. Considering it's all random chance, you could be there for hours just rolling the dice until you get the classes you want. For some, that alone is enough of a reason to never play this game. Here's my personal recommendation. First off, recruit characters until you get a blacksmith. Cross your fingers and hope it doesn't take that long for one to show up. This will save you many migraines in the future. Here's the deal. Last Bible Special decided to up the realism and include a chance for weapons to break when you use them. Yeah, I know, right? It seems to be totally random, like many other things in this game. Sometimes it would happen after an hour. Sometimes it would take 3 minutes. The point is, your weapons are going to break, and while you can fix them in town, that's a huge pain in the ass. And spoiler alert, when you progress to later parts of the game, you'll reach towns that don't have a blacksmith. Rather than worry about wasting hordes of money on spare weapons or precious minutes of your life hiking back to a place that has one, just bring one with you. Really, you'll thank yourself later. My second piece of advice is recruit someone who has a good intelligence stat, preferably with spells that inflict sleep or paralysis. Group targeting damage spells make the endless random encounters just a bit more bearable, and I'd hate to play through this game without them. As long as you have a blacksmith and a half-decent caster, I say you can recruit whoever you want. If you're not keen on the idea of bringing a blacksmith for the entire game, I'm pretty sure if you decide to upgrade his class to something else, he keeps his repairing skills, so that's always an option too. The team I recruited and kept for the entire game was as follows. An archer who I named Luke because this game feels pretty biblical. I chose him with the intent of building an agile, hard-hitting, yet fragile character that would pick off the back rows of enemy parties. a shaman who I named Vaughn, who starts off the game with a whopping 19 intelligence stat. This guy's gonna sling fire spells for the rest of the game. A captain who I named Odin. This is our heavy hitter, and as a bonus, he starts off with a weak healing spell. Finally, our blacksmith, Andre. He's kinda like the underdog, not extremely proficient at combat, but he provides a valuable service to the party and saves us a lot of time. With that, we've got a pretty balanced team and a free spot to fill with whatever creatures we want. One final thing I think is important to note is that unlike Wizardry where party members can be permanently lost, in this game, you're free to revive them as many times as you'd like, though it can be expensive to keep up with if you party wipe often. Where can we take care of patching our team? Well, that brings us to our next town location, the Abbey. Every town in the game has a place like this where you can access lodging and healing services. Lodging is essentially just staying in an inn. You pay a fee for each character that you want to restore, and it'll bring back their HP and MP. Unless they're dead, in which case you need to use the healing service. One funny but also kind of fucked up thing about reviving people in Last Survival Special is that it has a chance to fail. Reviving party members can get pretty pricey, especially late in the game after the fee has gone up quite a bit. And there's nothing worse than forking over thousands of dollars just to be told jack shit happened and you need to do it again. Even if you're casting a revive spell that you learned on your own, it can still fail. At one point in the game, I cast it about 10 times in a row before it worked. It's honestly a pretty stupid mechanic, because, well, what are you gonna do if this shit doesn't work? You're just gonna do it again, right? It's a waste of time, just like the tedious recruitment speeches. Healing will also take care of any nasty status effects like paralysis. Lastly, you can save your game in this building, so be sure to not forget about that. Finally, our last two destinations are where we'll stock up on equipment and items. The Forge, as I mentioned earlier, is where we can get our equipment repaired and buy new gear. Take some time, check out your team's starting gear, and see if any improvements can be made. The shopkeeper thankfully lets you know if you're about to purchase something that a particular class isn't able to equip, so you don't need to worry about that. The shop sells more miscellaneous items and equipment. I highly recommend grabbing one of the flame staffs you can see in this menu. In this game, magic items are highly useful. They tend to be imbued with one particular spell that can be cast as often as you'd like without consuming any MP. The flame staff gives you a great group targeting fire spell, which will make the first dungeon much easier. Grab a handful of restorative items, and with that, I think we're about good. Once you got your guys all decked out, it's finally time to kick off our journey to the Holy Land. Select Ignis Fort at the bottom, and get ready for the slog of a lifetime. This dingy place is only a few floors deep, so I guess you can consider this a warm-up round. First thing you're gonna notice, we got no map. Head to your list of spells and cast Mapper to take care of that. It'll probably take like 5 seconds before you get your first encounter, so be ready. The battle system is very simple, as usual, and is almost identical to the first Last Bible game. Your options are to fight, set the battle to auto, view your stats, run, talk, or manage your ranks. You definitely know how these work by now, but for the sake of tradition, I'll explain it again. Pressing fight allows you to assign orders to each of your team members, whether that's just attacking with your equipped weapon, casting a spell, using an item, or defending. Just so you know, using auto this early on will get your ass handed to you. Managing your ranks is where you'll call demons in and out of battle, and you can also move around your party structure to keep your strong guys at the front and the soft squishy ones at the back. The similarities to the first Last Bible don't stop here. The negotiation system is, as far as I can tell, the exact same thing as in that game, which is to say, it fucking blows donkey dick. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or maybe you need a refresher, talking to a demon has it ask you a handful of yes or no questions. There are only maybe a dozen possible questions you will ever see, and there seems to be no way to judge a demon's personality through the ones they ask you. It's just lazy, boring trial and error. No sweetening a demon's mood with money or items or something, just yes or no to the same few questions the entire game. It's bad. It makes you wish you didn't have to deal with it. And honestly, if you're smart with the classes you chose on your human party members, you don't. It is the definition of a tacked-on game mechanic. I wonder why they didn't just, I don't know, make this game under another franchise? Last Bible 2 had a way better negotiation system than this game, and it originally came out a couple of years beforehand. Why not use that system? I mean, they ripped off Dark Lord Grias from that game, that's fine, but stealing objectively better gameplay mechanics must have been too far. I just don't get it. I'm really not trying to shit on this game that much, but just think about it. It's clearly not a game for people who love the other Last Bible titles. By making it a quote-unquote hardcore dungeon crawler, you're already alienating most people. But not only do you make it a brutal Jerusalem tunnel rat simulator, you use the series' earliest, worst mechanics to give it the slightest resemblance to a Megami Tensei game. Maybe this game and the first Last Bible were being developed at the same time? I don't know, but my god, who is this for? Maybe it's just my own little piece of damnation, a cruel mockery of my willingness to play through shit just because it exists. You might think that sounds dramatic, but I can't think of a better answer. Anyway, fusion can be done by simply bringing up your spells list and casting the fusion spell, so you're free to create as many new demons as you'd like, provided you can stomach the recruiting process. Oh yeah, and despite being a first-person Megami Tensei game, there's still no magnetite meter that limits how often you can have demons summoned, so I guess that's a plus if you never liked that system. And fuck, do you hear this battle music? This sounds like an auditory seizure. As a matter of fact, most of the music in this game isn't that great. I know, it's a Game Gear game, but damn. Let me put it this way, if you hear a song while I'm talking about this game and it sounds good, I probably pulled it from somewhere else. Once you've gotten used to how everything works, it's time to figure out what exactly we need to do to progress further into the dungeon. First of all, it's a good idea to seek out the compass on the first floor. It's in a room pretty close to the entrance, and while it isn't required, anything that helps us navigate a bit better is much appreciated. As you explore the place, you'll quickly realize most of the rooms in here are empty, and in fact, that's true of the entire game. The shitty part is, you're gonna have to check basically all of them if you want to be sure you've solved each dungeon's puzzles properly. And it can quickly get pretty repetitive just seeing the same graphics and the same empty rooms over and over. For this dungeon, thankfully, the gimmick is pretty simple, and there are hardly any traps to worry about. You'll see a handful of locked doors throughout the place, with each one displaying a riddle. All you need to do is find the proper item for each door, open it, and then progress to the next, which sometimes involves a bit of backtracking. Eventually, after a handful of doors, you'll be able to leave the dungeon and reach the next town. To embark upon our door unlocking journey, we need to head to floor 3, which happens to be the bottom floor, and defeat the first boss, Eraster. He's not very difficult, and in fact, you'll probably appreciate not fighting several enemies at a time for once. Just wail on him until he goes down. You might want to have your protagonist defend if you're worried about him being killed, because if he dies, the party automatically wipes out. For the best results, I'd suggest leveling up each of your characters 5 or 6 times, though if you're doing your best to explore every room of the dungeon, considering how high the encounter rate is, that should happen on your way here. It shouldn't take more than a couple turns to bring this boss down, despite how threatening he may look. After he goes down, you can find a pyramid sitting on an altar in a nearby room. This is our first key item. As I mentioned, you're going to have to backtrack to the first floor. This is why being very thorough when exploring is so important. If you missed the fact that there are multiple locked doors spread throughout this place, I imagine you'd be stuck here for quite a while trying to figure out what the hell this thing does. If you're running low on health or MP, you may want to seek out a spring on the second floor. You can find these at least once in basically every dungeon. Every time you interact with a spring, you'll be told that a specific color of water is flowing from it. Depending on which color it is, you'll either get a good or bad result for the character that you choose to drink it. The best color you can get is yellow. It gives you a full restore. This shit is, as always, a dice roll, so it's gonna come down to how patient and lucky you are. But if you're willing, a way to fully restore your party in the middle of the dungeon is provided. Back on the first floor, you may notice there are 2 locked doors. The one we're looking for right now contains a riddle urging us to seek the triangular stone that eludes us. Pretty simple. Inside, you'll find a weird-looking statue of the sun god. You can choose to have a character examine it. Now, it was at this point that I realized this game was packed to the brim with pure, concentrated bullshit. So, I pick someone to check out this statue, and what happens? They get stabbed by a poison needle. Okay, fair enough, I fell for the trap, right? So after this, I leave the room and wander around the dungeon, looking for another treasure that I may have missed or a door that may have slipped by me, and I just can't find anything. I crawled the damn place twice over, and I just couldn't figure it out. Here's the deal. The item you need is found by interacting with a statue, but you have a fucking random chance of getting it. Come the fuck on. That means you can literally go up to this stupid-ass statue and just get poisoned repeatedly, but you have to keep doing it until the item you need drops. If you ask me, this is an inexcusably stupid mechanic. It's like embedded into human DNA that if you stick your hand into something and it stabs you, you don't do that shit again. And if you're crazy enough to try it twice, you wouldn't do it 3, 4, 5 times. Like, come on. I would love for someone to let me know that one of this game's many classes has an ability that lets you get around this, but from looking at a spell list online, it doesn't seem like such a thing exists. Even if there was, why even have this in the game? Maybe it's supposed to remind people of classic pen and paper RPGs, I don't know. But all it amounts to here is precious minutes of your life that you'll never get back. This is a recurring theme with most of the game's puzzles too. Once the game finally lets you have it, the Apollo's stone will drop from the statue, and you can unlock its corresponding door, which is back downstairs. In here, you'll have to repeatedly examine a shrine until you find the Spring Dew item, which you then bring back up to the first floor to the other locked door, where you'll find a balloon-breasted moon goddess statue. Examine this until the game lets you know that the floor started to shake and the sound of flowing water can be heard, and then it's back down to the bottom floor again, where you can head through the final door and reach the dungeon's end boss. Holy shit. When you step into the boss room, a black hole materializes in front of you, and out comes this crazy-ass thing which looks like a lion holding a sun in its mouth. This is Vitriol. It's likely he'll nail a couple of your party members, but that's okay. As long as you're putting out 100 damage or so per turn, which is quite easy, he'll go down fast. That's kind of the deal for most of the bosses in this game. The unrelenting encounters you face along the way are much more difficult than what actually waits for you at the end. It almost feels like a battle between glass cannons, where both sides can put out decent damage, but won't be able to stand up to it for long. Just keep your protagonist safe, and don't let up until this guy goes down. If you're lucky, you might get some critical strikes to speed things along. It seemed to happen pretty frequently with Odin. Sometimes you can even get double criticals, which really turn the battle in your favor, oftentimes outright ending it entirely. After taking care of Vitriol, head just a bit further, and we're on to the second town of the game, Dahlia. If you thought that level went by a little fast, keep in mind, I'm not talking about the 600 nearly identical battles I've fought on the way. The actual content of each dungeon is pretty slim. So, an important thing to note about this town. There's no fucking blacksmith. That means if you haven't recruited one for yourself, you either need to walk back through the previous dungeon to reach Constance again, or hope that one of your party members has a spell that lets you teleport there and back. There might be some items that let you do that too. Either way, it's going to take time or resources unless you brought one with you. A new location we can check out is the lab, where we can fuse demons. Considering we can already do pretty much everything this building has to offer, this isn't very impressive, but the little clown guy that owns the place looks pretty funny. Stop by the town's hospice to heal your characters and save, stock up on any items you need to, and just like that, we're on to Athenor Cavern, the game's second dungeon. Honestly, before I decided to do very much in here, I felt like grinding for a bit. You may or may not want to do the same, but the idea of getting really deep into this place only to get wiped out and have to do it again didn't sound great, so I decided to ensure I had the best equipment possible and a few more points pumped into my speed stat. Vaughn's fire staff combined with a flame sword that Vitriol dropped allowed me to easily cut through hordes of enemies and quickly rack up XP. This gimmick becomes less efficient the deeper we go, so I figured I'd milk it for just a bit longer to gain a brief advantage. The idea of the first floor here is that you need to track down two statues, one of King Athenor and the other of Queen Alchemia. Each of these need to be examined until they drop a rose and a lily respectively. Then, you just need to take each to their respective shrine, and you can progress deeper into the dungeon. Thankfully, this puzzle's all contained on the first floor, so we don't have to do any more hopping back and forth for the moment. The only thing you could call a trap on this floor are a few tiles that'll spin you around in a circle if you step on them, but if you got your map up, it doesn't really matter at all. Moving on to floor 2, you can find another one of those goofy ass water fountains if you're in the mood to mess with that, but otherwise, we have another boss on our hands. Looks tough, right? Well, he's not. He'll drop in just a few turns. There's barely any strategy to give here. Interestingly, you can actually paralyze this guy with magic, and if you manage to do it, you'll just win automatically. You can paralyze more bosses than you'd think in this game. It's actually kind of crazy how often it works, so be sure to give it a try because it's satisfying to pull off. There's not much else on the second floor except for a few rooms with pitfalls that drop you down to the next. While these are ordinarily a huge pain in the ass, we actually need to fall into one to reach a new part of the stage. But it isn't actually open yet, and it won't be until we finish a puzzle on the third floor. The puzzle we're about to do can be a little tricky, but first, we gotta take care of this snake on a stick. While he did knock out a handful of my party members, he wasn't fast enough to get all of us, and I was able to quickly bring him down. After dusting yourself off from this one, you'll run into the main attraction of floor 3, the morgue. Essentially, you got multiple coffins down here. It doesn't take long to realize that the coffin either has a type of tree on it, or the name of a gemstone. Each one will prompt you to either open it, or leave it alone. So great, what the fuck are we supposed to do? As far as I'm aware, there's only one hint regarding the solution. Return to the first town in the game, visit the town center, and listen to rumors until you hear the one that explains that royalty used to be buried in coffins with names relating to jewels, while the trees were reserved for enemies. So the solution is to open every coffin displaying the name of a jewel. Then you go back to the second floor, and in front of the middle pitfall, there'll be a new one that takes you to an intergalactic warp portal on the wall. Very cryptic, to say the least. I mean, what the hell? When you solve the puzzle, there's not even like a little click or a message that says a new path open. You just have to know you got that shit right, then leave and happen upon this mysterious new hole in the floor. Shit. Holy fuck, it's the Grim Reaper. This guy's not quite as simple as the others were. He's got a beefier health bar as well as Tetrakarn, which can reflect all physical damage back at you. On top of that, he can cast a spell simply called Death, which, kills you. There are spells like Tetraja that can counter this, but my party didn't have access to that yet, so I kinda just had half my team defend and hope for the best. Defending really can be your best tool sometimes. I feel like this game makes it a lot more of an appealing option than most. A straight shot to one of your party members typically deals at least 100 damage, but defending heavily reduces it usually down to the 20s or 30s. If you get lucky and the boss repeatedly attacks the same guy for a few turns, that's probably enough to win. You remember what I said about glass cannons, right? I think there's just a bit of luck with this fight, because the Grim Reaper can also disorient your team, and if that happens, it can be hard to recover before the fight snowballs out of control. When you finally emerge victorious, the boss drops an item called a Djinn, which is one of a few special artifacts that can evolve a character to a better class. I decided to use it on Odin to make him a bit stronger, and shit, he looks a lot less human than before. So yeah, at the cost of some of his human form, Odin has changed from a humble captain to a powerful magus. The magus class fucks pretty hard. While it does reset the character's level back to 1, you deal double damage, and a half hour or so of grinding will quickly raise his stats beyond what they used to be. Odin was already the powerhouse of the team, but now he's starting to venture into overkill territory. If you can score a double critical hit with a magus, you're likely to deal somewhere in the range of 2,000 damage, which is absolutely insane, and happens more than you'd think. Well, believe it or not, we're at about the halfway point of this game. Head into the city of Antioch, rest, resupply, and get ready for the next dungeon, the Hohenheim Lab. You know, when I think lab, I imagine like machines or something like that. This is just another palette swap shithole. You might also be wondering, who the hell is Hohenheim? Well, he makes his first appearance very early on in the stage. He orders us to leave his lab at once, and failing to convince us, challenges us to a battle which he loses without putting a single scratch on me. In classic internet fanfiction fashion, the Hohenheim we were fighting this entire time was actually a hologram. Nice. Don't get too comfy. You'll definitely want to slog it out for a bit and grind up a few levels before going any farther. These blue shit monsters offer great XP, and it's a pretty efficient way of leveling up as long as you can take them out in a turn or two. Hopefully your casters have been learning some better spells, or you're taking the time to roll out with upgraded equipment. Always save one enemy specifically for your mages to attack if you have one, because that tends to be a guaranteed kill. While he's busy knocking out one enemy, you can have your other guys focus fire on the rest. Up on the second floor, this giant-ass bird attacks us, who's capable of paralyzing your entire party. Believe it or not, Andre actually came in clutch on this fight, finishing it off when most of my party had been killed. As the weakest party member, this really surprised me, and it was honestly pretty sick to see the guy finally have the chance to do something other than fix our shit. Unless you've really been pumping up that speed stat, it's likely that this boss is going to beat you to the punch every time, because its stat is pretty far up there, somewhere in the low 30s, in a game where the max you can have is 40. Moving on, there's some kind of mini puzzle you'll have to deal with where Hohenheim will appear in a room, say that you aren't worth ascending to the next floor, and kick you out. Literally, all you have to do to avoid this is take a longer path that goes around him, so it's not much of a thinker. There's also a quick puzzle where you'll run across some boxes with animals on them, and you just need to open the one that has a bird on it. Hohenheim pretty heavily hints at the solution on this one during one of his heavenly gatekeeping rants, so again, it's pretty hard to get stuck there. With that, well, that's about it for the dungeon. We just gotta face 2 bosses, and we're in the clear. Pretty damn short once it comes down to it. Reaching the final chamber of Hohenheim's lab, we come face to face with the man himself, who explains that he's a legendary sage who possesses the power to bring new life to the world. He asks what the big idea with our quest is, and wonders if we really want to throw away our lives for a mission. There's no way to really side with him or anything, so I just told him I was fine with my mission and refused to elaborate. Naturally, we gotta fight him. He's a lot harder this time, or at least he's supposed to be. This guy is capable of casting powerful damage spells, but I actually stun-locked him for the entirety of the battle, which was pretty anticlimactic. See, with every strong hit you land, there's a chance to knock your opponent unconscious and have them waste their turns. Sometimes they just won't get back up until it's far too late, and that's exactly what happened here. It kinda feels wrong having a group of 5 people beat the shit out of an unconscious old man in a dark cave, but you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes, I guess. When he goes down, you'll get another class change item called the Alchem, and surprisingly, you get a bit more lore. Hohenheim explains that we are actually the third person to beat him. The first was Paragon, commander of the armies of Constance. You know, the town we started off in. I'll give you 3 guesses as to who Paragon is. Here's a hint. It's the only other guy in the game that really gives a shit about our mission. The other person to defeat Hohenheim was none other than Dark Lord Grias. He explains that both of these guys have abused their power, and as he dies, Hohenheim laughs and says that he really doubts we'll make it out of here alive. Sure enough, we got one final obstacle before we can leave. An angel chained up in a nearby room. Kinda freaky. Honestly, while he is stronger than Hohenheim, you shouldn't have too much trouble unless he lands his charm spell on you. If you're lucky, this boss will waste a turn healing. The spell is pathetically useless and only heals about 1/5 of what you can put out in a single turn. Show him what's up, and when he goes down, he drops, the god. Yeah. This thing is actually just an item that increases each of your stats by 1, but I feel like they could have got the phrasing a bit better. Well, that does it for the labs. As we move on to the final city of Damascus, there's one long dungeon lying in wait for us, Jerusalem itself. Whereas each of the past dungeons we've conquered have had a pretty small amount of bosses and floors to navigate, Jerusalem is a 13-floor gauntlet that has some pretty nasty enemies. The shops here really want you to know you're nearing the end, because everything is expensive as shit, and it'll definitely take a bit of grinding to fully equip your team. Also, no blacksmith. In the final fucking town, there's no blacksmith. I really hope you brought one of these guys with you. Imagine being 8 or 9 floors deep and your weapon breaks. Who the hell wants to carry around 3 expensive spares when you could be loaded up with magic, restoratives, or puzzle-related items? It's just a huge pain in the ass, so really, be sure you're ready before you commit to exploring this place. One great item I recommend from the shops in Damascus is the Death Rod, which is a free cast of Mudo, the instant death spell, every time you use it. This can get you out of some pretty shitty encounters, so definitely keep it in mind. Oh yeah, and we've still got that Alchem item from Hohenheim. I wonder what that thing does. After using it on Vaughn, I was totally expecting some kind of terrifying half-demon hybrid, but it actually just turns him into an old man. This is what the Sage class looks like, and it's one of the best magic classes in the game, so hey, not too bad. After spending a while leveling him up and getting our team in top shape, I finally decided to tackle the dungeon proper. Let's finish this crusade so I can take a fucking break. I feel like the first puzzle you run into here in Jerusalem is just trying to mock you. You'll never guess what it is. In a game where almost everything has a random chance tied to it, our first puzzle is a roulette wheel. You can find it on the 2nd floor. You just have to spin this stupid thing around until you get the icon to land on the bottom, and then a previously locked path on the 1st floor becomes open. There are some nice little decorations on the wall at least that hint at what kind of result you're looking for, but it's not like it gives you much control on how quickly you can get it. Moving between these floors, you might find yourself feeling a lot of pressure from the heightened difficulty on these encounters. There's actually an interesting little hint to take a bit of the heat off. The smaller your party is, the smaller enemy parties tend to be. You might notice that in a lot of my footage, I run with one spot of my team empty. That actually prevents me from having to fight the maximum amount of enemies. If you know you're about to fight a boss, or you just want to use a demon after a battle's already started, summoning them in the fight itself seems to be a free action and can be done instantly. So unless you're running with 6 humans, most of the time you can just leave one spot open and you'll be better off. The first boss of this place after we've cleared the roulette wheel is this nasty looking eyeball muscle man. He's got some power, but interestingly enough, can be paralyzed if you're persistent, or just lucky. I took a bit of damage from him and lost a few of my guys, but luckily we're still close enough to the entrance that leaving for a quick resupply isn't too big of a deal. Moving on up, we next run into this big ass mirror just sitting in a hallway. I'd advise you to just be really careful with this thing. If you've got a magus on your team, or really anyone powerful, I would just move right along, don't even touch it. If you choose someone to interact with it, sometimes they can see a strange vision of, quote, the goddess who will fully heal you. What seems to happen more often, unfortunately, is that the mirror spawns several copies of whoever looked into it and forces them to fight you. It's honestly pretty strange, and you're basically screwed if you choose one of your stronger team members. As you can see here, this squad of Odin copies hit me for 1300 damage in a single turn. Ouch. Not far after this mirror, we've got our next boss. For me, all she did was use Tetrakarn the entire fight. Just back off and defend when she does this, wait for it to wear off, then hit her, and repeat until you've won. This had to have been the easiest fight in the entire game. I don't even know what else she can do. On the 4th floor, you can do an optional puzzle to get a weapon called the Demon Bow. I really recommend picking this up. In the hands of my archer, it dealt about 700 to 800 damage per hit. The puzzle just involves picking up a crown and choosing the right treasure chest to leave it inside of. The hint is the animal whose power knows no bounds and is above all the others. You need to choose the one with a lion on it. Simple enough. One of them is a pelican, and I guess you could argue that it's technically above the lion since it flies, but I don't know, royal family, lion strength, you can follow the logic there. The Demon Bow is a great tool for finishing off the game, and ensures you're putting out excellent damage every turn, and considering how easy this puzzle is, I don't see why you wouldn't go for it. Our next obstacle up on the 5th floor is this big ass sleeping demon. He's got a key we need to move forward, but you just can't wake him up. Behind him is a series of rooms with 3 chests that require light coins to open. How do you get the coins? By giving some money to beggars lurking around the place until they decide to give you one. They'll ask you over and over and over for very small sums of money, and you just gotta keep doing it until you get the right item to drop. Why can't you just pay like 5,000 at once and specifically ask for the special coin? I don't know, but it pisses me off. I just have trouble believing the developers of this game tied so many puzzles to randomly dropped items. But I tracked down a Japanese guide for this game online, and even crawled video game forums looking for information, and everything I've found suggests that's really just how it is. You're gonna need more than 1 coin to finish this dungeon, so do this shit until you get 3. Or if the RNG isn't in your favor, you can wait a bit longer and source them from another guy later on. Either way, you still gotta do it, and there will always be some random chance involved. Each of these coin slot boxes has some unspeakable horror waiting for you inside of it. One of them, which is by far the hardest, is filled with these eyeball demons called Gaias. They have a lot of health, and their damage isn't anything to be ignored. This shit may as well be a boss, because it's harder than most of the ones we've fought up to this point. A really good spell for this situation is Megiddo, or maybe the Force ability if you've leveled up your protagonist enough. Each of those deals over 1000 damage per turn, and can make short work of the fight. If you don't have those, well, it's definitely still possible. I managed to do it. You just gotta focus on one at a time until you're done. Hopefully, a few will waste turns with status effect spells that end up doing nothing. If you can beat this one, you'll do fine on the others, they're hardly worth talking about. The Gaias drop you an eternal lamp that causes Big Boy over here to shit his pants and run away, leaving a key that allows you to gain another inch of progress. After some largely uneventful walking, you run into him again, and this time, we have to engage in a proper fight. He's got a high speed stat, but if you've been carefully working on that, you should be at or near the max level by now. Before he really had a chance to do anything, I knocked him unconscious, and, well, the rest kinda writes itself. Alright, so for the rest of the dungeon, our goal is to collect 3 sacred books and deliver them to an old prophet who lurks near the highest floor. The first is called the Book of Anima, and can be found just ahead on floor 7. Here, you have to run a little gauntlet of difficult enemies that have guaranteed spawns for every room you pass through, both on your way in and on your way back out. If you got the death rod I was talking about earlier, it really helps out, especially with the Kumbir. The hardest enemies to deal with in here, in my opinion, are the chiefs, these rogue guys here. I didn't have any great spells that they were weak to, so it was just a slugfest each time I ran across them. When you finally bust your way through to the end of this thing, you'll meet this old sage who gives you the Book of Anima. He also allows you to trade items with him. This is a faster, albeit still random, way of getting more light coins. Remember, You need 3 to finish this dungeon, so if you lost any from earlier somehow, just grab them here. Be sure to take care of this before backtracking. It doesn't even matter what you traded this guy either. Let's say you give him an old sword you had. In return, he may give you some random health restorative item. No problem. If you don't want it, you can just trade the item he literally gave to you back to him for another one. And you can repeat this endlessly until you've got what you want. Sometimes he'll give you one of those god items that raises your stats, so if you're interested in that, it can be an efficient way to boost up everyone without doing any fighting. After this, we're clear to move to the 8th floor. I'm not even trying to be dirty on purpose with this observation, but the map looks like a condom. There's not much here aside from Azoth's sword, which you can find just by exploring thoroughly and using your minimap, so I'll leave that to you. It kicks ass though, so keep an eye out. To get our next book, we gotta do a bit more trading. On the 9th floor, you'll find an old man who asks for 3 lights. That's where those coins come in. He'll trade you those out for a ring, and then you can find another guy who'll trade your ring for the Corpus book. Just 1 to go. And this one's in a pretty goofy spot, which I'll show you in just a second. First, we gotta take down, the Hulk. Not much to say about this one either, except what the hell is up with his name? Project? Like, projection? Hulk holograms? I have no idea. You can sing him a nice lullaby and he'll fall asleep, and then you can just slap his big green ass cheeks until he goes away. Nice. So the last book. On the map, you can see up here that there's no indicator for a door. You just gotta trust your gut and walk over here anyway, where there actually is a door. Then you gotta do this again and go through a big ass open room that of course has a pitfall in it that'll ruin your entire day if you fall into it. It's on the right side, just as a quick tip. After this big room, you'll find the book tucked away at an altar. This is the Book of Spirit, and thank God, it's the last one we need. With all the heavenly literature in our pockets, we've just about finished the dungeon, meaning this game's nearly over. On floor 11, you'll find a prophet who will take the books from you and give you his blessing. Except, this little bastard at the door won't let me in to see him. He has the nerve to call me a young whelp. I had literally no idea what was wrong here. I looked over my inventory like a dozen times, making sure I had every book. I looked around floors I had visited to make sure there wasn't some other puzzle I missed. Nothing seemed to work. Every time I came back, I'd just get insulted and sent away. After thinking about specifically what this guy was saying, it suddenly hit me. A whelp. He's calling me a weakling. To get into this guy's room, it sounds like you need to be a certain level. My hunch was right. You can't get in until you're level 45. That might not sound very high, but when I got to this point, I was level 43. It didn't take very long to fix the problem, but I thought it was pretty interesting considering how we've been wiping the floor with all the bosses we fought so far. Surely the final boss isn't like 10 times harder or anything, right? Well, it won't be long until we find out. So the Prophet Trismegi takes our books and gives us the Book of the Prophet, as well as an Oracle item that allows us to upgrade a character to the Prophet class. I'll be honest with you, at this point, I wasn't really interested in starting another character over from level 1, and my team was working so well that I just didn't use it. I imagine it's probably on the highest tier classes you can get, but what's the point in fixing what isn't broken? We got one final boss before the final encounter, Ouroboros. Anyone who's played Strange Journey is probably shitting themselves right now, but there's no need. This is like Ouroboros' lazy cousin. Even nearing the game's final minutes, paralyzing bosses still works, so one good cast of the spell and he's dead. The devs really should have fixed that, I mean, come on. The 13th and final floor is somewhat interesting. For starters, another wise guy designed the map on this one. The floor is shaped like a guy wearing a Viking helmet, and the staircase you arrive on is literally at the tip of his fucking penis. Like, I'm not making this shit up, you can see it. How else do you explain that? Talk about a climax. So, this place is a little warp maze, but before you're allowed to enter the final boss's chamber, you need to make your way to the top of the map, or the tip of his hat. Here, you'll find a shop that can only be entered on a full moon. At the very least, this is written on the door to the place, so it's not cryptic or anything. Walk back and forth until you can see a full moon on your menu, or cast a spell to change the moon cycle, and voila, You get a big selection full of overpriced shit to choose from. We need the item down here called the Monado. This is the Monado flag, which you have to bring to the boss store to be let inside. You may also see this white flag in the shop too. I got one of these as a drop from another boss. It's a little late to be using it, but let's say you made it all the way up here to the final floor, and your team is just toast, running low on HP and MP, and you can't find a quick fix for it. The white flag, if used in battle, kills the guy who uses it, but fully restores everyone else in the party, even from death. By now, your protagonist has learned a revival spell, so you can pretty much exploit this as much as you'd like to refresh your team. Granted, the revive spell has a chance of failing, but odds are you'll get it to work, and then your team will be in a much better state than before. With our flag in hand, it's time to confront Grias, the Dark Lord who's taken over Jerusalem. As soon as we enter his room, he introduces himself and asks if we truly know the goddess. Assuring him that we do, he asks if we believe that she wishes to annihilate all beasts for the sake of humanity. I think you can tell what he's getting at. There are actually two endings in Last Bible Special. Following through with your mission and killing Grias, ending the existence of beasts forever, is our first option. In a mainline title, you could probably call this the law ending. Since that's what we've been working for this entire time, let's do it and see what happens. Now don't worry, I'll show you the other one too. So, Grias says that our intentions are mistaken and starts the battle. This guy hits like a truck. Very quickly, he took a shot at Andre and killed him instantly with an attack that did over 400 damage. With the help of our Demon Bow and the Azoth Sword, you should be putting out well over 1000 per turn. My character, Luke, and Odin were just a non-stop barrage of damage onto Grias, while Vaughn remained defending for most of the fight to perhaps absorb a hit or two if I got lucky. From what I can tell, none of the status effect tricks seem to work here, so it's just a good old-fashioned raw power slap fight. Keep it up and heal if you can manage it. Otherwise, you just need to hold out for 7 or 8 turns without losing the main character, and you'll be fine. When Grias dies, we get a cutscene of our hero striking him down, as he says again that we've been misled. Because of our actions, all beasts will vanish from the kingdom, and the humans will be free to create a self-centered world that welcomes no other species. Grias vows to return one day and make things right, and then finally vanishes. And that's it. You get a cute little credit sequence, and you're left to think about how 20 plus hours of work just led to you getting lectured by the main villain. So, obviously this wasn't the best ending. Let's head back in there and finish things off the right way. This time we tell Grias that we do not believe the goddess wishes to eradicate the beasts, and he explains that the High Priest of Constance, also known as Paragon, truly plans to create a world for humans alone. To be honest, that doesn't sound so bad, because all these beasts have really made a great effort to rip my guts out. But I guess their actions make sense considering my entire mission was to kill them forever. I'm sure we can work something out. He asks if, knowing this, we still wish to follow Paragon's orders. Assuring him that such an idea sounds terrible and we'd never follow along with the High Priest's plans, Grias becomes our friend and urges us to help him set the world on its proper path. Our new mission is to go back to Constance and kill Paragon. This is a pretty cool twist, honestly. In a game like this that really just lacks, well, anything, having 2 possible endings was the last thing I expected. The idea of going on this grueling crusade only to realize that you've been kinda misled the entire time and your goal isn't exactly the best for the world, then taking your new strength and returning back to where it all started is cool as hell. We literally have to go all the way back to Constance too. Unless you get a spell that can teleport you there, it'll be a bit of a walk, but my little victory lap back through every town in the game didn't take that long, and my excitement for what would happen next was growing with every step. When you reach the city and head to the church, it's now become a dungeon, shaped like the Star of David. The place is one big warp maze where you'll need to pass through certain doors that aren't shown on the map to reach the center. All of the enemy spawns in here, strangely enough, are things we were fighting back in the first dungeon, so they can hardly scratch you and only serve to annoy you on your way through. When you finally make your way to the center, it's time to bring down Paragon and restore the world to its proper order. He asks how we could betray him, claiming we've sold our soul to the devil. But in reality, this guy was just masking his violent, selfish goals as something good, and he should not be the one to represent the church. Paragon challenges us, fighting pretty much the same way as Grias did. You'll want to watch out for Madoon, however, because that shit can blow your entire team away in a single cast. At the very least, if you die here, the dungeon is part of the town, so you won't have to make your way back through a huge stage for a retry. Provided he doesn't spam instant death on you, you'll find that Paragon is actually a bit easier than Grias, and he goes down without too much effort. As he dies, he turns into an acid trip soy jack, and exclaims that all of his plans were for nothing, revealing that he actually just wanted to be king of mankind. Thankfully, such a world will never exist now that we've taken care of the mastermind behind it all. And that's the end of Last Bible Special. Muddled in heavy RNG, empty dungeons, and a high encounter rate, Last Bible Special is an oddity of a game that I'd have trouble recommending to anyone except the most persistent fans of first-person dungeon crawlers. The class system is fun to mess around with, and there are a lot of interesting things to learn about it. You've also got a huge variety of spells and equipment, and overall, the final dungeon is decent enough. But I don't think that's enough to make up for the onslaught of tedium you have to deal with to enjoy it. I will say, however, the setting is really cool. I'd love to see another Middle Eastern themed dungeon crawler. This is definitely like a D tier game as far as Megami Tensei goes, probably worse, but for those that really enjoy dungeon crawlers, I think there's some fun to be had here. At the very least, I can say I finished the experience feeling a lot more positive than another Bible, and that shit took me like a fourth of the amount of time to finish. If you're interested in this game, give the first dungeon a shot. I think you'll be able to tell pretty fast whether or not it's a game for you. Well, with that, we can move on to the true climax of the Last Bible franchise, the third and final game in the main trilogy, Last Bible 3. You think it's good enough to salvage my mental well-being after all this shit? Fuck, I hope so.